BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And today we're going to be talking all about the serial killer John Wayne Gacy, who is perhaps a serial killer who needs no introduction. But I got back into this one because I was on Horror Central, the YouTube channel that's giving away lots of free movies, lots of free available content, Horror Central, and they had a copy of the movie 8213 Gacy House, which I watched last night. And we've also talked a lot about John Wayne Gacy here on this channel. And we've done 3 uploads where we've had some discussions about him, and those will be available in the description box here. And if you'd like to hear a more overall comprehensive discussion on John Wayne Gacy, I would highly recommend that you check out some of those. We have just an overview of John Wayne Gacy as the serial killer that would be known as the Killer Clown, as well as one on the personality traits that John Wayne Gacy had very precisely. And there's even one that we have here in the description box called Ray Bradbury on serial killers. And we talk about John Wayne Gacy as well because Ray Bradbury is somebody that people might not necessarily associate with serial killers, but we look at some claims that he made in his books Dandelion Wine and Farewell Summer, talking about serial killers, and we'll say a little bit about that throughout the duration of the episode. I have to tell you, though, Ray Bradbury on serial killers, if you listen to anything from that description box there, that is one of my all-time favorite uploads to have recorded. And it was back in the day when we were doing mini uploads on the channel. It's only 13 minutes long. The mini uploads were usually about 9 or 10 minutes, sometimes 13 minutes, as you see there. That was something that we did in 2019. But as we move onward with our discussion with John Wayne Gacy today, as I said, I watched the film 8213 Gacy House, and it's kind of a seance film, paranormal haunting film where some people are trying to get in touch with the spirit of John Wayne Gacy. And I'm glad I stayed for the ending because some films do not heat up until the very end. And if you would like to watch that one, it is available on YouTube for free. Once again, Horror Central. To talk about the life of John Wayne Gacy, he was born on March 17th, 1942, and he passed away May 10th, 1994, executed, sentenced to death for multiple murders. And we are going to jump over to the website Crime Museum to have an introduction that is written here. To many people, John Wayne Gacy was a young, friendly man who loved to entertain children. He frequently dressed up as his alter ego, Pogo the Clown, at parties that he hosted for his entire neighborhood. By 1978, public perception of Gacy would change forever, and he would earn the ominous nickname, the Killer Clown. The first warning sign about Gacy appeared in 1964 when he was found guilty of sodomizing 2 young boys. Gacy was arrested and spent 18 months in prison. By the time he was released, Gacy was divorced and decided to move to Chicago for a fresh start. And about the 18 months in prison, I believe with this one, just recalling on some of the previous material that we've mentioned in the uploads that you can find in the description box, just going off of memory, but I think he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but he was let out not only early, but extremely early, serving 18 months in a 10-year sentence. In Chicago, Gacy founded a successful construction business, attended church, remarried, and volunteered as a precinct captain in local politics. During this time, he threw elaborate block parties and built a solid reputation in his community. Gacy was respected and admired by friends, neighbors, police, and others. I would say that the more famous discussions about John Wayne Gacy revolve around, we can just get right down to it. He was a bisexual serial killer, but he operated within half of his sexual orientation. He targeted boys and young men. He would murder them, and then he would bury the bodies in the crawl space under his house. And the crawl space would always reek with this bizarre odor. In the 2003 film, Gacy, they were talking about how Gacy would always complain about the smell, and this would even be one of the ways in which he would lure people over to his house, saying that he needed work done, needed constant repairs, always needed to deal with this problem, more renovations, or doing some type of cement work in the crawl space to alleviate this problem of moisture buildup. In short, he had a very flimsy excuse, and in reality, he was murdering people and burying the bodies under the crawl space, and he is very famously attributed to 33 murders. Some of the bodies, however, were dumped into a river, and that was another method of disposal that he had. What I would like to do for this one, to do something a little bit different, is to go on to our first upload and talk about some of the comments that you guys had been leaving on John Wayne Gacy. And the first one comes to us from Marcel G, who says, "Hey, Mr. Black Box Radio. I think it would be interesting to learn about the childhood of Gacy's parents, especially that of his father." And with John Wayne Gacy, I mean, I cannot think of a better way to start when we're looking at some of these discussions, because I was on a particular website that was doing a presentation on them, and it was called crimeinvestigation.co.uk, and it's called, their article is called John Wayne Gacy and His Unquenchable Lust for Death. And they talk all about how he is someone how he had a normal childhood, and that how he just grew up with, like, he was coming from somewhat of a decent home and upbringing. And I think that that really is quite bizarre. I mean, it's really bizarre to hear, because everything that I've learned about John Wayne Gacy is saying things that are almost absolutely to the contrary. They're talking about how his father was both emotionally and physically abusive. And when you look at the documentary Murderer in My Family, they even get into some of the methods in which John Wayne Gacy would go about these things. And oh, excuse me, it's Monster in My Family, misspoke. And in Monster in My Family, this documentary, they were talking with John Wayne Gacy's sister, and that she made the claim that their father would beat them with a leather strap and would be relentless no matter how much they showed that it was hurting them, no matter how much they cried or pleaded with him to stop. He would not stop. He would just relentlessly beat them. So that's a very large driving force. And in a previous upload that we did, I made the statement that there must be some type of connection between John Wayne Gacy murdering boys and young men and the beatings that he received from his father. So that's another great comment from Marcel G. Our next comment comes to us from Joy Bradford, who says something that she believed that John Wayne Gacy was a serial killer that targeted boys and young men because he was ashamed of his bisexuality. And that article that I mentioned from crimeinvestigation.co.uk, they said something that was rather along those lines. Like, they're just saying it's both. And at this point in the article, I have to agree with them. I disagree about the good, normal upbringing of a childhood that Gacy would have had, but I would completely agree with what they're saying about how it's both. He was dealing with some very bad abuse from his father, as well as being ashamed of his bisexuality, or just the entire concept of how anything that he would do would be deemed too girly, too sissy, being called a wuss. And the 2003 film, Gacy, talks all about this. This is even how they introduced the situation. Gacy and is dealing with his father, and he receives just a lot of emotional rejection for those very specific reasons. And then they've made several films, though, about John Wayne Gacy, and we're going to look at the list right here. We have one that was recommended to us, but the first one we said Gacy from 2003, and then they did the movie Dear Mr. Gacy with William Forsythe, which is based on the book by Jason Moss, who we'll talk about in the future. And the one I watched, 8213 Gacy House, last night, which I wish that it had more John Wayne Gacy stuff in it. But as I said, it's a paranormal haunting film. Super Strike 9 says, To Catch a Killer with Brian Dennehy as John Wayne Gacy is the best Gacy movie. It was made for TV, but still good. And I just checked. This version, To Catch a Killer with Brian Dennehy playing John Wayne Gacy, this film is available on YouTube. I will be trying to watch that this weekend. And then that's the last one that we had on the list here of movies that they've made about John Wayne Gacy. I would like to complete as many of these as I can. I think that it's a very valuable thing to go through. And here we have one from Prague Queen 59. Next comment. Very insightful synopsis, BBOR. I appreciate all your efforts with the program. Greetings from Illinois. And if I got to talk about this because John Wayne Gacy was operating mostly in the Chicago area, and Prague Queen just wants to recommend a book about that called Buried Secrets, about things that are going on in the Chicago area, which is Buried Secrets by Russ Ewing. So thank you, Prague Queen, for that recommendation. Now, what we can say about John Wayne Gacy, not only having this type of bisexual life that he is trying to hide from people, but I think that it's the whole concept of hiding, because once again, he's not targeting women. He's married, he's fathered children. John Wayne Gacy is very adamant that he was a bisexual. Some homosexual serial killers will even just deny it. We had people like Herb Baumeister, the I-70 Strangler, who just simply just didn't acknowledge anything that he had done. Herb Baumeister would go on to commit suicide, didn't say a word about any of the murders, and that when he was targeting men in his suicide note. John Wayne Gacy is rather quite to the contrary. And we also have media of John Wayne Gacy in prison. Some of the things that I've been reading about him recently are going down a bit of a different pathway than some of the more famous things that they've talked about. Number one, there's a very famous documentary out there. I saw it once when I was in my early 20s, and I saw it once last year when we were discussing it on the channel. And what they're saying about Gacy is that he had this type of personality that just didn't fit into any of the criteria for diagnostics. But some of the sources that I was even reading today were talking about how he was diagnosed with schizophrenia at a time, and that he was also diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. So I believe that they do have some things that are going on in diagnostics. The other thing that I would say about that is there's a particular thing about how he's hiding his lifestyle, how he's hiding his destructive tendencies. And that goes to something that I learned from this article from crimeinvestigation.co.uk that talks about how it's all about compartmentalization. They're saying no matter what you say about John Wayne Gacy, he was about compartmentalization, where it's like he can use his destructive tendencies only at certain calculated times. And this is really something that we see with serial killers that is just quite shocking, that is just out of the ordinary. It is rather just mind-boggling, the level of superhuman patience that these people would have experienced. It's just that they can just, if they do have these destructive tendencies, that they can just, number one, maintain control of them at until very opportune times. Or you also have people like Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, who would just wait for hours in the bushes for somebody to come home so he can attack them. No cell phones, no internet at the time. We're talking about just waiting for hours in the bushes so he can attack somebody. It really just goes to show you that cold, methodical, and calculating abilities are so greatly heightened with serial killers. And that's something that we've really talked about over the past 12 months on the channel, when we've just gotten into the concept of the serial killer has heightened predatory instincts. And I know it might even sound cliche to say that a serial killer is a human predator, but that seems to be what's going on. That's the way that people are going about this situation. They're just like, all right, this is something that is going on with people, and their just predatory instincts are off the charts, and they're using all of their intelligence and human abilities to try and target other people. But I would say, though, that if you would like to hear more about John Wayne Gacy, I would recommend that you go over to pwcenter.org, because the image that you'll see here is actually one of John Wayne Gacy's paintings. And there are two names for this painting. It's either called Goodbye Pogo or Pogo Says Goodbye. And there's actually a stage play at pwcenter.org that talks about it's the story behind this painting. And I was like, really? A 3-act stage play that's written about the painting that John Wayne Gacy made? Not Gacy's life, mind you, but about the play. But the play is about this painting. And you can find a copy of the text of this play that you can read in PDF format at pwcenter.org. And this is by Nicholas Greco. And right now, what I would like to do is I would like to just read a small segment from that. I mean, I read the whole thing today. It's 92 pages long, but it's something that you can read rather quickly. And it's what we're going to read right now is John Wayne Gacy is going to be talking to somebody named David. And let's just hear how some of the things in this stage play would play out. The chubby kid is the funny guy, the friend, the kid that gets nothing, while someone else feels better laughing at what I didn't have. I would have rather had a good body, like you, Dave. I would have rather been on the varsity team, like you, Dave. I would have rather had the girls fighting over me, like you do, Dave. I would have loved for people to just love me, but for no reason, like people will. I would have loved people to have given me the love that you have, Dave. But they don't. I didn't. I didn't have any of that. But you know what? At some point, you've got to understand that nothing is worth doing for someone else. Art is for the artist. If you make something and someone doesn't like it, too bad. You can't spend your whole life trying to make other people happy. And David says, well, what about the artists you hear that go crazy, that do crazy things? Aren't they purposely doing things to make people unhappy? Are they really artists, or are they just crazy people who draw? And John Wayne Gacy says, I tend to think of those kinds of artists as entertainers. And I love that scene here. And this is, once again, the play is called Pogo, that is written by Nicholas Greco, and the transcript of this, the book is at pwcenter.org. Once again, Pogo. And John Wayne Gacy also did several paintings, and there's he has several of them that you can find on the internet. And of course, the painting that you're looking here is Goodbye Pogo, also known as Pogo Says Goodbye. One final thing that I would like to say about John Wayne Gacy is that in that article that we were going through earlier, they also made the comment that John Wayne Gacy was referred to as a Jekyll and a Hyde. And while it is possible that people who have schizophrenia can develop this Jekyll or Hyde personality, I almost think that that's a bit of a mischaracterization for the following reason. Gacy seemed like somebody who didn't really have a whole lot of transition, because I don't mean to be too literal, but from what I recall of Jekyll and Hyde, and it's been ages ago, he drinks the potion or tonic or something, and Henry Jekyll turns into Edward Hyde, and it's like a very rough and almost even painful transformation. What I've heard about John Wayne Gacy through the documentaries and the articles and the first-hand connections over the years, what they're saying about him is he would walk into the store and he's just this jolly, bumbling oaf, more or less, and then he would walk into the bar and he was like a completely different person. It's just like one location to the next, and the persona would change completely. And while that is very common with people who have schizophrenia, they just have these different types of personas, and the more it gets exaggerated is when it actually becomes a problem. Carl Jung said it was totally normal to have at least 5 personas. He said in one of his interviews that you can hear on YouTube, having multiple personas in itself doesn't mean that you're a schizophrenic. But once it becomes so, like, I think the transformations become so rough, or that it's just one, or it becomes destructive even. Like 1 second, he is just like a cloud in the sky, and then another second, he is just very destructive. And they do talk about this in the film Dear Mr. Gacy as well. They show some of this near the end of the film about how Gacy's personality would greatly change. In the 2003 film, I thought that they really highlighted something that was very important with Gacy. And this might sound silly, but he just seemed like such a sensitive serial killer. I mean, sensitive in the sense that he would get his feelings hurt so easily. And like someone says one thing that he doesn't like, and then it's just like the murderous rage is taking over within the character. But I would want to read off one more comment that we have here on one of our previous uploads. And this one is going to come to us from our upload on Ray Bradbury on serial killers. Once again, if you listen to anything that we have in the description box, I would highly recommend that one, because I think it's a really different perspective on the subject. And this one comes to us from Leslie Anderson, who says, to me, a serial killer is one that acknowledges the ravine. And we got to say something about that. Just imagine 2 hills. And we got 2 hilltops, right? And the ravine or the valley. And this is going to be important for this comment here. The serial killer right away sees every movement as the creation of the new world. He is constantly walking on air over the ravine like a god. A terrible god, because the world keeps getting created and the old actions are simply discarded into the ravine or into the valley of time that become a trash heap. So I think that this is going to go on to say some things, but if you just imagine 2 hilltops with a little valley in the middle, and just thinking that you can float across the from hilltop to hilltop, and you don't have to go into the valley, that you're just above all of the other things, or that the suffering of other people is just not relevant to you, it's not going to affect you. It's so insignificant to you because you can float from hilltop to hilltop like a god, and yet you're just in this type of fantasy world. And that's what I think the serial killer is talking about, or what Leslie is interpreting that the serial killer would be thinking about in that particular way. And that is, you can hear more about this type of thinking in our discussion, Ray Bradbury on serial killers, available in the description box here. Thank you to everybody who's left some comments. I would love to hear more of your comments in the comment section below. So if you have anything to say at all about John Wayne Gacy, serial killers, please drop something there. And I will see you guys on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And until next time.